This episode may contain explicit language. What does modern homeschooling in 2025 look like? Like, do I have to invest money in a giant chalkboard? Am I buying desks? I mean, am I turning my living room into a classroom?
My mother was a professional writer. She wrote 77 books. She taught writing for years.
Only
and
77?
The way... Yeah, right? What a slacker.
To validate your homeschool experience, you do not have to shame a brick and mortar system. I know that teachers are working their butts off with no resources and trying to do their best. And I think there's more strength together.
What about the family who can't really afford homeschooling?
Oh, honey, we made no money.
Welcome to Care and Feeding, the show that's as honest and as messy as parenting itself. I'm Lucy Lopez. I also host another podcast, The Mamacita Rica. I'm mother to Amelia, who's 15, Avery, who's 12, and we live in disgustingly hot Miami, Florida.
Still?
Disgusting.
It's still hot? Oh my God.
It might be 50 degrees this weekend, but I don't believe it. Lies and fairy tales.
I'm Elizabeth Newcamp. I write the homeschool and family travel blog, Dutch Goose. I'm the mom to Henry, who's 13, Oliver, who's 11, and Teddy, who's 9. And I'm in Atlanta, Georgia.
I'm Zach Rosen. I make another podcast. It's called Weirdly Helpful. And I'm dad to Noah, who's 8, and Ami, who's 5. We live in Detroit.
This week, we're going to go home. And not just for the holidays, not just yet. More for homeschooling. We've been getting a ton of questions about homeschooling lately. And after that New York Times piece about parents saying goodbye to public school, we knew exactly what needed to be delivered. The great homeschooling episode. We're going to talk about teaching, textbooks, how Elizabeth makes her kids call her principal Newcamp. All those good things are coming up in this episode.
Yeah, Elizabeth, you all know this, is our homeschooling parent, our expert. What is this like for you, Elizabeth? It's
Christmas.
kind of like the
Yeah, I mean,
like church and state meeting. What's happening?
It's like the Super Bowl right now.
Welcome to my office. This is like the Super Bowl, yes. I mean, I love talking about homeschool. I also get so passionate about it that people assume that I think everyone should do it or that it's kind of the only path forward, which is not true. Public education is so important and most families rely on it, but there's also a lot of reasons that homeschooling can be a really good fit for some kids or seasons of life, and I'm excited to talk about that. And what's interesting for me is kind of what we can all learn about it. So although we're going to be talking about homeschool, I think the takeaway is like for all parents to kind of understand the system. I'm also excited to be talking to one of my personal kind of homeschooling heroes, Julie Bogart, who is the creator of Brave Writer. She's not just a homeschooling expert, but someone who's continuously challenging homeschoolers to think bigger about creativity, curiosity, and kind of our place in the broader education world.
So will Elizabeth Newcamp's head explode with excitement?
Or will Lucy end up homeschooling?
I don't know, Papa. We're going to find out, so stick around. Welcome back. All right, we're going to go dig into homeschooling. We are joined now by Julie Bogart from Brave Writer. Julie, welcome to Care and Feeding.
Thank you.
Can you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and Brave Writer?
Yeah, sure. My name is Julie. I have 5 adult kids that I homeschooled for 17 years. I worked in professional writing and editing before I started my company. I worked as a ghostwriter and a magazine editor and a writing coach. And it turned out that a lot of homeschool parents were struggling with writing instruction.
Yeah.
I was not using any curriculum. I was just pulling books for my professional career off my shelf and using the ideas I got from those. So I started meeting with moms who wanted help, and it seemed like the information I was giving them was brand new, even though for me, the information felt utterly familiar. And the reason for that is my mother was a professional writer. She wrote 77 books. She taught writing for years.
Only 77?
The way, yeah, right? What a slacker.
God. What was she doing with her time?
She didn't have a TV.
She loved writing, and she was a naturally encouraging person. Like, she didn't treat my writing like it was substandard or that unless there was perfect spelling, it didn't deserve to be read. She treated every exercise of self-expression is valuable. And so as I started working with my own children and then with homeschoolers, what I noticed is that they did not have that kind of foundation in their own understanding of writing. So by the time the year 2000 rolled around, literally January, I had started writing a writing manual, and I had organized a group of 40 families to be my guinea pigs, is what I called them. And they read each chapter as I wrote it, would apply the strategy in that chapter, and then they would submit the writing of their kids to me, and I would give coaching feedback. So that was the exchange. And very quickly, I realized that there was just a profound hunger for this kind of instruction. So in January of 2000, I launched my book and my first writing class. And I think I might be the first homeschooling company to ever offer an online class, and it was all conducted through email.
Wow.
Wow.
So that's the origin story of Brave Writer.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Julie, I invited you here because as the current homeschool mom on the podcast, we get a lot of questions, and Lucy and Zach have a lot of questions. And my oldest is 13, and we've been homeschooling kind of on and off. We're a military family, depending on where we are. They've been in private school, they've been in public school. But you have so much experience. And I feel like this is definitely a moment both for homeschooling and kind of in the broader picture of education, where there's a lot of light shined on homeschooling. And, as homeschoolers, like, we're often asked to defend things that are indefensible, or so generally I think Lucy and Zach are going to kind of pepper us with some questions about things, and hopefully we can just shed some light on some of these bigger questions about homeschooling and critical thinking and writing and all of that.
What does modern homeschooling in 2025 look like? Like, what does that even look like? Do I have to invest money in a giant chalkboard? Am I buying desks? I mean, am I turning my living room into a classroom? Are field trips now literally a trip to the grocery store? What does that look like in 2025? Because as far as I'm concerned, everybody's either being micro schooled, or is that a school like where my kids go to? What does that look like in 2025?
Fabulous question. The origin of the homeschool movement really started in the 1970s. There was a group of sort of interfaith and non-faith parents, like a very eclectic group of people who were not aligned necessarily politically or spiritually or even ideologically, except around one idea. And that is that parents should have the right to give their children an education at home if they so choose. And that education would be informed by the values and the beliefs of those parents. So that meant that you could homeschool your children according to your own lights. When that initial thrust of homeschooling was sort of born, and California was one of the flagship states where they were waging these kinds of measures to change the laws around schooling, one of the things that came out is that the structure of traditional education did not necessarily align well with the emerging understanding of child psychology and how children actually learn. So there's a difference in my world between learning and schooling. For instance, I wrote a book called The Brave Learner, not The Brave Student, right? These are two different modalities. Learning and learning how to be a student are not the same thing. So that original collective was not super successful in getting laws changed. What caused the movement to really catch fire is that they were able to establish, there was like this Amish family with religious convictions that actually put forward a lawsuit saying that due to the freedom of religion clause in the United States Constitution, they had the right to raise their children according to their religious beliefs and therefore keep them home from school, which was not reinforcing those beliefs. So that really caught fire. And then the infrastructure of church helped the movement expand at this exponential rate. In the early days of homeschooling, between 1975, let's say, all the way up to about 2000, what you had was a parent, usually a mother, at home with her children using materials she had purchased. Before the internet, these were books. After the internet, they were PDFs, right? Like that's really the only thing. But they were actually spending money or using the library. They were forming small groups. They might go on field trips together. But the primary educator was the mother. And it was a circle of children, anywhere from 2 to 12, sitting around her in a living room. And we could talk about that more in a minute. Along came the pandemic in 2020. And between 2000 and 2020, the internet started to change what homeschooling felt like because we had more access to curriculum, more options. I even started, like I said, an online class in January of 2000, right? Like this idea that the internet could connect people who were not living locally with each other changed it dramatically.
And more
we felt less
parents
alone.
talking about it, like knowing that it's an option and knowing that it's not all like the one thing that you had been exposed to, like the one homeschool family that you had been exposed to. All of a sudden you could see other families. At least that was my, experience. Like, finding people like you and being like, wow, there's all kinds of people learning from her.
So is that what's changed since then?
Well, so between 2000 and 2020, we had blogging, email lists, websites, conferences, and parents were suddenly, just what you said, Elizabeth, they were suddenly aware that we were a part of this bigger movement and we could consult with each other to refine our practices. But when the pandemic came along, a lot of parents who were maybe homeschool curious but never had the courage to kind of go for it on their own, they were given like a get out of jail free card for a year. They're like, this is a fail safe experiment. I can try homeschooling because everybody's home. During that year, businesses like mine doubled. I mean, it was like everybody in the world suddenly thought homeschooling sounded good. But here's the difference. The parents between 1970 and 2019 often researched homeschooling and then did it.
Yeah.
Starting in 2020, people started doing homeschooling and then finding out they should have researched it.
And all they knew was like what traditional school looked like. Like I would say that most of the questions we were on the air during the pandemic. It was like, how do I do this at home? It's like, well, homeschooling doesn't look like school at home, which is why I like how you use learner. It is home learning. There's actually not like the school that you think about. And I think the other thing is like a lot of us that are homeschooling went to school. Like what our education was from the school system, as opposed to being in a line of homeschoolers.
1,000%. In fact, what you said earlier, Lucy, like, do I get desks? Do I have a flag? Do I need a blackboard? Even the homeschoolers who research it first often start there. We always say the first year is a little bit school at home. It's all you know. You're trying to have a schedule and a lesson plan, and you're holding your kids accountable. But what is problematic today, and I use that word hesitatingly because I don't like judging homeschoolers. Make the choices that are right for you. But what I'm finding today is a lot of people want what they see as the fruit of homeschooling. They actually don't want to do the work of homeschooling. So they are teaming up with other people. They're hiring a teacher, or they're doing a micro school or a co-op, and they are offloading some of that primary instruction. But actually, that's a lot like school. That's more like starting a Montessori school or a Waldorf school. Home education really is, or originally was, in the home. That was kind of its defining feature.
For you, Julie and Elizabeth, I'm sure there was more than one, but what was like your primary kind of philosophical opposition to school? Like what were you guarding against by creating this new vision?
For me, it's a really funny story. I actually grew up in the 1970s, and my school was in Malibu Canyon, and all my teachers were ex-hippies, and they had gone to the Peace Corps. And we did all of this very immersive learning. We went down to the creek every day and drew a map and used field guides. We had an archaeological dig in our back canyon. We had an entire day dedicated to a Renaissance festival. We had holidays that were designated for different countries of the world. Like these were things happening in the schools. By the time I was in college, a lot of that had changed, this experimentalism. So I heard about homeschooling in 1984. Never had heard the two words together. And a man who was a friend of my fiance's asked me if I was going to homeschool my children. I said, home what? What's that word? And he started describing this tailor-made education where kids were free to be creative, to explore a passion, to be supported in growing at their own rate. And I wasn't even married, let alone have kids. But it reminded me of what I had experienced in school that was being lost in traditional education. So for me, it weirdly was kind of inspired by my public school experience, but the imagination was opened for tailor-made learning. That's for me what led me into homeschooling.
Yeah, I think I'm very similar in that I actually have nothing against, and this is something I want to talk about, like this idea that it's homeschooling versus brick and mortar schools versus public schools. Like to me, they're all part of this intricate fabric of making society work. Look, education, I homeschool because education is so important. I also support my public schools because it is so important.
Me too.
I also yes. And I mean, Julie, this is why you're here, because if you go follow Julie on any of her stuff, she's out there challenging homeschoolers to be better citizens. Like you don't get to just homeschool and forget that everybody else, like not everyone can stay home with kids, and kids have to be somewhere. Like there are these real, like, I don't think any of us at least here are advocating that like homeschool is the only way. But I do think what homeschool offers for us is a schedule that we like, that allows us to live the kind of life that we want to live, to be with Jeff, to do the moving. It has been better for my neurodivergent kids. It has been like, it does all of these things that solve problems. But I mean, listeners know we've done other things, because sometimes in life, like when we were in Tokyo, the homeschool life was not going to work for us. And so we did something else. And I think that's the other thing, is this like homeschool or die mentality versus like, this is a tool in the toolbox. And there are many reasons why you might want to use it. And in my mind, homeschooling allows you to try a bunch of things. We're a small group that's pretty nimble. We can move and see what works. We can try different things. And I wish that the alliance were closer between schools and homeschools, to be able to say like, hey, we're doing this and it works. How do we scale up? And in the same way, at least, I mean, homeschoolers that are doing the work are looking to schools for the programs that are working and implementing them. And I know like different states have different things, but in Colorado, they work very closely. There are programs where they offer enrichment. So the kids are able to use services from the public school, be part of those communities, but also still have the schedule that they want. You know, you could be an athlete, you could be, there's just like, your kids are really into theater. These are ways to I think utilize other, just like some other freedoms.
So you're saying that there are some families that are homeschooling, but then the kids go and do theater at the local school?
Yeah, I mean,
school?
yeah.
Oh,
We
cool.
did that. We actually did that. So in Ohio, the school districts allow you to enroll part-time starting in junior high. My kids took part-time enrollment in high school. A couple of them ended up doing full-time enrollment as a result, but they could take, like my daughter Johanna, she took French, acting. 1 year she took biology, or no, chemistry. Like you could sort of pick and choose the classes, and then that allowed her to be in the marching band, color guard, to act in the plays. So there are these hybrids, but I also want to say this. I think part of what makes homeschooling interesting, and the reason I support it, despite sometimes it has some glaring weaknesses, but the reason I support it is I think homeschooling has been a sustained critique of performance and outcome-based education, which I think is failing American children. So even though I have had kids do high school, and like I said, I always vote for the levies and believe that public school ought to exist, I do think that they were not amenable to change until people started pulling their kids out of the system. And I think we do have to reevaluate what we think learning is, particularly in the era with the rise of AI. Like that is already fundamentally challenging this performance-based metric instantly. It's making everyone reevaluate what is teaching and how do we quantify learning? We're all asking that question now.
This is where homeschoolers are so nimble. And I totally agree with you that like the ability to push back and say there are other ways, right? Like a homeschool class, I'm able to tomorrow let my children use AI to write a paper, see it, talk through it, and then be like, ooh, that really didn't work. Or these are the things that did work. I'm able to go take, Julie's class tomorrow and use that and try someone else's and be having those conversations. Whereas like, that's just not practical for a school system to purchase this curriculum for 1,000 students, right? And then the next month decide not to do it. So I do think that's where I think there's a lot of flexibility for us to say, like, there are ways forward in this, and we're a little bit more nimble. And if you talk to people that know what they're doing, the Julies of the world who have the education of knowing about writing or whatever it is, but also have implemented it. Because we do have a lot of teachers that are homeschooling now who I think are amazing resources to say, this is where a school system could go.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned this, like this great hybrid, the great hybrid possibilities of going and dipping into theater or chemistry or whatever. What do you think is something that public schools might be, how might the homeschooling community be helping them? Like, what does this reciprocal relationship look like beyond you just using their services? But like, what are they finding inspiring in your modes?
No, that's a fantastic question. I will say this, and I will just speak from personal experience because I haven't done research into like the widespread impact of homeschool students in classrooms. But when I went to the parent-teacher conferences for my kids, one of the things that stood out from the teachers in their feedback to me is that my kids wanted to be there. That was always where they started. My son Noah, this is a story I'm allowed to share. He's 38, 3 kids, successful adult. You need to know that going in. Okay, so while he was homeschooled, I was not great at teaching math. So when I saw that we could do Algebra 2 at the local high school for free, I was like, great plan. So I put him in this class, and this kid who had always excelled at math was suddenly getting a C. And I was humiliated. I walked into that parent-teacher conference like, they are going to ream me out for being a homeschooler, for failing my child. He must be terrible at math. So I get in there and I'm hanging my head, and this teacher is like bright and cheerful. And I'm like, I wonder if she knows I'm Noah's mom, because she can't feel that way about Noah. So I sit down and she says, hey, I love having your son in my class. He's so smart. He's really good at math. I said, he's getting a C. She goes, oh, that's because he doesn't turn in homework. I said, wait, he's not turning in homework? We do it every night. She's like, yeah, for some kids, the journey from the locker to the room is just a lot. And I said, oh, and as it turns out, we found out later he had ADHD. So that's all part of that journey. But then I said, but you don't seem worried about his grade. And she said, Julie, every day I start the class with a problem. I throw out something I haven't taught yet. And I ask the class, how would you approach solving this problem? And she said, there are 30 kids, 29 of them pick up a pencil and open their notebook and wait for me to talk. And Noah makes a guess every day. And she said, some days he's right, some days he's wrong, but he thinks mathematically and he's going to do just fine. And I said, but the C. And she goes, don't you homeschool? I said, yeah. She goes, then what do you care about the grade? And that was really funny. So anyway, we had this nice conversation, and she basically said, what we wish we had were curious students. I've had kids, when I went to the graduation of my 4th child at high school, this woman comes up, gives him a big hug at the graduation. He's like, Mom, this is Mrs. Bell. Mrs. Bell, this is my mom. I'm like, after she left, Liam, who's Mrs. Bell? She was never your teacher. He goes, oh no, she taught English. I never had her, but I wanted someone to read short stories with. So I went and found her, and we used to have lunch together once a week to do American literature. He did that for 2 years. I didn't even know about it. Homeschoolers bring a vivid desire to learn to the classroom when they show up. Not all of them, I'm sure, but mine did.
No, but I think they all bring like, and again, we're talking in generalities, but like homeschoolers learn, they have to be self-motivated. They learn to be self-motivated. And in a good homeschooling situation, like one of the things you get to lean into is that you can lean towards their interests. And I think what they learn is that anything that's being taught, there's probably something related to something they're interested in. They just have to go find it. And, kids are really motivated. Like kids want to learn. And there's a lot of freedom to make it interesting. And they have a lot of experiences. I mean, I always think like what we often bring to some of these is just the ability for the kids to share some of the things they've been able to do firsthand. We had this amazing experience yesterday where we have a friend who started a gelato business here in Atlanta. My son struck up a conversation with him and he invited us to go tour their small business. This is like a one room, they're making gelato, they're distributing. He's asking questions about like, well, what percentage are you, this is Henry, what percentage, of your profit are you using for renting out the facilities? And the guy's showing him this stuff. And it's like, when he brings that into a project, there are not a lot of other kids who have like gone to this is not a factory tour. This is like, this guy's business. But that's an incredible opportunity that he can then go share with people who have learned this is not to say that this is a better experience, right? Because there are other kids having an experience where they're doing a big group project, which Henry will not have the experience to do, like, or he doesn't have the experience to compete for some big award. Like, but I think when they get into a group in college or in a business, the ability to bring these unique experiences is what builds a better society, right? Like that they can say, I have this lived experience. Okay, I have this. How do we work on those strengths? Like, do you want everyone sitting in the same place learning the same thing? I think we all agree, like, no, that's one of the values of many different types of schools and different teachers and different programs. Like, all of our kids need different things.
One of the things that I think is happening in this era of post-pandemic education is we're all asking the question, what is effective learning and what value will it have for a future career? And with the rise of AI, the only thing that outlasts AI is originality. It's the capacity to think for yourself, to generate insight, to offer something that cannot be easily replicated by a machine or by an artificial intelligence. And so one of the things that homeschooling, I think, does is it puts kids in touch with the power of learning and adapting. My son Jacob famously in 10th grade took me out for dinner to tell me I had ruined his life by homeschooling him. And I ended
like, did he like
and
ask
I
you
had
out?
to pay for the dinner. Oh, totally. And then he's like,
Wow.
and you're paying. I'm like, this was not a dinner I want to pay for, but I did. But here was his comment. He had gotten into high school by then. He was in the marching band. He's a kid who loves to compete. So it was really fun for him to like work his way from last chair to first chair in saxophone. He suddenly discovered grades. We didn't do grades. And suddenly he wanted straight A's. And what he found out was, as a sophomore, because he hadn't been there as a freshman, he would never get to be valedictorian. And that was suddenly meaningful to him. And then he's like, and if I'm not valedictorian, I can't go to an Ivy League school. So you've ruined my life, basically. And he wanted to be a valedictorian so he could give the commencement address. I said to him, listen, I'm sorry. Parents make decisions for their kids. And I'm totally willing to take accountability for making a decision that maybe you wish I had made differently. I said, I don't need you to ever love homeschooling or be grateful for it. But I do hope someday you'll want to know or you'll understand why I chose it. Just that's all. If you're 45 someday, 3 kids married, and you're like, oh, that's why mom wanted to homeschool, because it was not a casual decision. So we finished our spaghetti dinner. 2 years later, he is writing a paper for his English class. And he goes down to our local college because his dad worked there to go to the library to do research. And he said he was sitting on the floor in the stacks with books all around him. And he had the sudden thought, oh, this is why my mom homeschooled me. I won't have time to write a good paper because there's a due date and I have other classes. But if I was homeschooled right now, I'd actually get to read all these books and write a really good paper. So he came home and told me that. So I was glad it didn't take till he was 45. But then wouldn't you know, the valedictorian of their class was a violinist who was an introvert and didn't want to give a speech. So they had a competition to have someone else give the speech. You already know the outcome. My son Jacob gave the speech, right? This is like the crazy thing about their drive. And then he went off to college. And one of the things that he told me is his peer group, the smart kids at the same school, Ohio State, they were already burned out on being great students. He was just getting started. And he did eventually go to an Ivy League law school and had the life he wanted. Homeschooling did not hinder him. By the way, every scholarship committee, every law school asked him about his homeschool background. It's a differentiator, and it actually teaches them kind of how to go after the things they really want. I think that's one of the benefits for some kids.
Thank you so much, Julie. We're going to be right back with more Julie, including listener voicemail. But in the meantime, we want to hear from you. You can send us your parenting questions, stories, updates. If you're holding class at home right now in your living room and your children are surrounding you and cuddling with you and having the best homeschooling day ever, you can also email us, careandfeedingpod@slate.com, or call us 646-357-9318.
Let's be honest, life gets messy, families fight, coworkers overstep, partners do weird stuff in bed. Luckily, Slate's advice columnists have seen it all. Sign up for the free Slate Advice newsletter and get our latest takes on sex, parenting, money, and every moral gray area in between, plus exclusive bonus letters delivered straight to your inbox. Subscribe now at slate.com/advice.
So welcome back. Let's kick things off with a voicemail we got from a listener.
Hello, my name is Ashley and I live in Pittsburgh. I saw on Threads that Elizabeth was soliciting homeschoolers to call in and talk about our experience, just a little bit about myself and my family. My husband and I both work really flexible jobs. He's a professor and I'm a web designer. And when it came time for our oldest to start kindergarten, we were traveling a lot and we kind of thought like, well, we don't need to put him, he's, 5, almost 6. Like, he doesn't need to be sitting in a classroom for 40 hours a week. We don't like being at a desk for 40 hours a week. Like, let's just try having like a more flexible childhood for him. And so we did that, and he's now going into 9th grade and has been homeschooled the whole time. He tried middle school and it did not work out. We also have an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old, and we started for the flexibility and the family time. My kids are all 4 years apart, and so by the time like one was about to go into kindergarten, their little sibling was just starting to be fun, and so I wanted them to have good relationships. And it's been incredible for our family. It's such an efficient way to do school. It's not like, it's a lot of work for me. One of my kids noticed that today. It's not that it's no work, but it is really rewarding. I love learning aside them. I thought I hated, history, for example, and I have been loving learning alongside them. They're all so engaged and know what's happening in the world. They're very integrated into society. They're not, squirreled away. We're secular, progressive homeschoolers. And I would say that the same cons that it has, like for our society, as somebody who is progressive, I think that public school is really important. And I do have feelings about not being part of that. But I don't think that I should have more feelings than somebody who moves to a suburb that's not diverse for the quote unquote good schools or sends their kids to private schools. So like, we get a lot of flack for homeschooling from a societal perspective, but I think that we're just as much to blame as everybody else who's not participating in their neighborhood school. And I think that hopefully educating our kids for justice and change, and they're more aware than they might be if they're just learning the curriculum, the whitewashed curriculum in a lot of cases, depending on where you live, that your state provides. Anyway, I didn't expect to be a homeschooler this long. I didn't expect to be enjoying it so much, but I am, and I am so grateful for it. My kids love it.
I think a lot of homeschoolers, especially in the kind of secular progressive area, feel this way, like very conflicted about what's going on and how, especially with all of the Department of Education things. And Julie, I know you have some thoughts about that and how homeschoolers need to be thinking about their role in this whole debate and in this time of kind of turmoil in the education system.
I really do. It's so funny. I was just writing about this yesterday. I think one of the challenges in modern homeschooling is that because the legal right to homeschool came through a religious exclusion, and because churches in general are networked and radio was really powerful in the 80s and 90s and a consolidating force, and the state organizations were all Christian, the dominant culture of homeschooling is anti-institutional, Christian, and politically conservative. And in fact, that body, that mass movement, while I was raising my children, they were active in creating worldview classes and sending their kids to the local city council meetings and state senates to learn how to protest, to learn how to enact sort of this Christian nationalist vision. That was one of the planks of homeschooling that was well sold during those years. So along come secular homeschoolers, and they want to join a co-op, and suddenly they have to sign some statement of faith they don't believe, and they feel isolated, and they don't have the infrastructure that makes them meet new friends who homeschool every week on a Sunday, right? So they feel at sea. Now, the internet and Facebook groups and stuff have helped them find each other a little bit, but we are in a very polarizing time. I mean, it's more polarizing to me than ever. And I was actually kicked out of some organizations and conferences over doctrinal issues, like literally. So I understand the secular progressive person's feeling of some alienation within homeschooling, a desire to support public schooling as a part of our community responsibility, right? Those communitarian values. And then finding it hard to find your people. That's a very legitimate feeling. Brave Writer as a company tries very much to be open for all homeschoolers. We are not trying to alienate any one group, but it's hard to find spaces like that.
Yeah, I mean, just this tension. We seem to keep coming back to it. And Elizabeth, I really like how you're saying it's actually not a tension, or it doesn't have to be.
We're constantly pitted against each other. Like that is, I think, online kind of where Julie and I have both been engaged, like with people saying, like, to validate your homeschool experience, you do not have to shame a brick and mortar system. And brick and mortar friends and people in, I'm not here to say what's happening that there's nothing bad happening on the whole. Like, I know that teachers are working their butts off with no resources and trying to do their best in a bad, like what I really think is a bad system. They're being asked to not only teach, but care and babysit and all of these other things, right? In a really difficult time. And I think there's more strength together. But this comes, Zach, you shared that article that I thought was so interesting from the New York Times.
Yeah, which speaks really to like the recent kind of uptick during and post COVID, right?
And also about like
homeschoolers
kind
going
of
way
the
up.
trend of like homeschooling, meaning that moms need to stay home.
It's kind of like commensurate with the rise in like the trad wife stuff, right? And that is like, I would imagine not a huge portion.
Well, I just have seen a rise of actually kind of the opposite. And maybe Julie can speak to this, but I think one of the things that the COVID homeschooling time did was give a marginalized community a sense that they could homeschool, and that they could bring in the values that they want to bring into homeschool that they're not getting in schools. I think like the rise of Black homeschooling country, like nationwide, is up. I see a much more diverse homeschooling group now than pre-COVID. And so it's funny, like I think now with the internet and all this, there are ways to make it work if you're not a stay-at-home parent. Like there are just so many other options. And so I thought this article was so interesting because I do think that narrative of like, this is a religious thing where mom stays home. Like I'm at things now with homeschool dads. Like that I'm seeing so much more of that. Julie, is that kind of your experience as well?
The way that I think about it is this. With the rise of feminism in the 1970s and no-fault divorce, we wound up with a class of women who felt like they had finally broken free of the pressured expectation to stay home with their children. So they went and got divorces and careers. And a lot of those kids, my peer group, grew up in those families. And when it was our turn to have kids, we actually saw our feminism as expressed through the choice to stay home. And we adopted homeschooling as our career. So we saw ourselves as career educators who chose to stay home. And it was an expression of the freedom to make that choice. So that is a little bit like the foundation of how homeschoolers saw themselves. Today, where we are is that we have this active social media scape where we have adults who are influencers, creators, earning money through these new kinds of entrepreneurial ways while they can stay home with their kids. And that creates like a very strange portrait. Like on the one hand, you look like you're baking bread and you're hanging out with your kids, but you're also like bringing in the cash. Like there's a funny mix there.
There's
I'm not
literally
against
three
it.
cameras there that we do not see.
Yeah.
That's
Camera people, I mean.
100% true.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And even if it's on the very small scale where it's your own iPhone sitting on some kind of a tripod, you are still curating for the sake of working. And I did work the whole time I homeschooled. I did work, but I worked it around the edges and I worked from home. What Lucy said at the start of this conversation, I want to make sure we got back to it. The biggest change in homeschooling that I see is group schooling. So whereas it used to be a mom in a living room, today there are more co-ops, hybrid schools, and micro schools than ever. I spoke to a group recently in Cincinnati where 6 families got together post-COVID and they hired a teacher to teach all of their kids. But I came to speak to the parents about homeschooling, and that teacher who's teaching their kids wasn't there. And it created a really interesting conversation at the end because they're like, I hope this teacher will do the things that you said. And I finally had a conversation with the leader of the group, and I said, you know what? I think you could do this. I think you could lead this group. I think you have the vision. She's like, really? I said, yeah. It just takes a little bit of chutzpah, just a little bit of self-confidence.
I do think like the number one
and that's
thing
what
that
I
is
think
said,
is missing.
Yeah, is this
Yes.
like, I could never do that. And there are a lot of reasons
That's it.
not to homeschool, but I don't think that's one of them.
Is homeschooling, you said, well, I had a job, I did this, I did that, and I was also homeschooling my kids. What about the family who can't, it almost feels like can't really afford homeschooling?
Oh, honey, we made no money. We were broke. One year, our whole family of 7, we made $29,000 and we lived in California. I relied so deeply on the library, on free services. We had one car. I used coupons. We ate soup a lot, right? One of the things that I often hear is that homeschooling is a privileged choice.
Yeah, because it
And
does come across like that.
it can. No, it
To
absolutely
me,
can.
it does, and it's
Yes.
not like I'm not poo-pooing any of this. I think it's fantastic. However, it does come across like you gotta
I mean,
have a little
certainly
kasharouche.
someone has to be home with the kids. I think that is like, to me, that's the privilege, is like, you
Right.
cannot leave children alone. So if everybody in the household has to be somewhere else to earn money, to like, this doesn't work. But it's not like, in terms of what time you have at home, if you have coverage at home, homeschooling is not 8 hours of school the way that
It is not.
it's like, I mean, Lucy, you and I talk about this, like, we're done by 10 most mornings. Like, it's not that they're not doing other things, but they're going to go read a book or they're going to go play Legos or whatever. But I agree, there's, especially now, you don't need all the fancy stuff. I mean, social media is going to tell you, and even I'm guilty of this, like writing about different products and different things that we're using, but you don't need what you need is a library. You can get almost everything you need. They carry curriculums, they carry homeschool books, they carry any book you would want your child, to read, which is why we need to protect libraries, of course.
I guess I just wanted to like hear your
such an
opinion
important
on that.
question.
No, it's good.
Because
Yeah.
I just, for me, I'm like, okay, well, that sounds great, but are we making money? I mean, what are we doing now?
And to be fair, a lot of parents put their kids in private school, right? They work and they spend a lot of money on private school. I think it's always just a question of your own values and priorities. The place where I see the privilege coming into homeschooling actually is the education level of the parents. I remember one mom that I was really close to. She grew up in Southern California in a bilingual family. Her parents were Mexican, so she spoke English and Spanish, but she said she never learned the grammar of either and wasn't a competent writer in either. So what I found when she was homeschooling her kids is she lacked confidence in teaching English. So she was having them do like this insanely hard program. And because she was so
Overcompensating.
afraid.
There's a lot of that in
Yes,
homeschooling, yeah.
totally overcompensating. And it created a lot of stress in the relationship with her kids. And I finally said to her, I said, Blanca, I think what you're suffering from actually is a feeling of inadequacy in your own education, and you deserve to solve this now. You deserve to know the grammar of English and Spanish that you speak so beautifully and fluently, both languages. So you know what she did? She hired a tutor to teach her, and she took a whole year off of teaching her kids while she corrected these absences in her own learning. I felt a similar feeling about math. Math was incredibly hard for me. And I used to swap writing lessons for math lessons with my friend who is a math person. Where privilege really shows up the most is, number one, your own educational level. And then number two, your access to resources to supplement for your own lack of skill. And I think for home educators, that's why collaboration does make sense. It's nice to have co-ops. It's good to sometimes do shared learning around, like we hired these two friends of mine who were nurses to teach biology and do all the dissections. I wasn't going to do that, right? So really acknowledging your limits and having the vision and foresight to supplement those. But the truth is, I had one mom say to me, she's like, wouldn't it be amazing if there was a building for homeschoolers where you could get your art and your music and your sports and your math all in the same place? And I said, honey, they call that a school. And her eyes were like, oh, I get it now. It was pretty funny.
Well, and that is why community is so important. Like something that schools do bring is community. And I'm so annoyed when people say like, what about socialization? Like anyone who's met my children knows they're incredibly socialized, but that does take effort. Whereas the school doesn't necessarily take effort because you send them and everybody else is sending them and they're there and you do have to make effort. But I think a lot of homeschool parents also don't think about the community for each other as a homeschool parent.
That's right.
Because once you have that, you really do have kind of endless resources. I'm still connected to people I homeschooled with in Florida and in using them. Like they're editing my kids' papers as somebody other than me taking a look. And I'm, sharing a curriculum. I did this whole thing for cities and built this thing. It was great. I was able to share that with here's all the stuff. I did all the work. You can go do this. And the internet does allow that, right? Totally free. Here are YouTube videos we watch. There's a lot of people out there teaching the things and it doesn't cost anything. There are also a million great things you can spend money on. If you have it and you want to buy all the things, it's amazing. But I think that's such a good point, Julie, about that the privileges in your education and how you can solve those holes. And Julie, before you go, where can people find you?
I am on bravewriter.com. That's my website for my company. I also have an author website, juliebogartwriter.com. And I have a slew of books, The Brave Learner, Raising Critical Thinkers, Help My Kid Hates Writing. And then if you want to interact with me directly, I'm on Instagram at Julie Brave Writer, and I actually respond to direct messages. So feel free to reach out if you have questions or needs.
Thank you so much, Julie.
Julie, it's been a dream. Thank you.
It's like Christmas for Elizabeth.
I loved it. Thanks for having me. This is wonderful.
All right, homeschoolers, curious parents, and everyone in between, we want to hear from you. Are you teaching from the kitchen table, dreaming about it, totally skeptical? Tell us. You can email careandfeedingpod@slate.com or give us a call, 646-357-9318, or of course, chime in on the Slate Parenting Facebook page.
And holiday shopping season is here, and we want to help you find the perfect gift for the kids or parents or loved ones in your life. Maybe you've got a middle schooler obsessed with board games, a preschooler deep in a train phase, a teen who's suddenly into skincare, or a toddler who wants to help in the kitchen. Tell us who you're shopping for and what they're into, and we'll come up with ideas on an upcoming episode of Care and Feeding. We've tested a lot of stuff with our own kids, and we've got some thoughts. We're happy to suggest experience gifts, low-cost ideas, or things that are just plain fun. And if they don't love it, you can totally blame us. We're promising so much with this, and I think we're going to deliver. Drop it in the comments or call us at 646-357-9318 or email careandfeedingpod@slate.com and tell us what kind of gift you're searching for. If you're a Slate Plus member, you can join us on the playground where every week we give recommendations on things like books, easy school lunches, Halloween costumes, and more. If you're not a Plus member, we really hope you'll consider showing your support. This is the primary way you can ensure that Care and Feeding continues. We have a lot of different types of gift recommendation episodes planned as we come up on the holiday season. You won't want to miss that. Plus, if you're a Slate Plus member, you get access to lots of other cool stuff like bonus episodes across Slate podcasts, no paywall on the Slate site, and more. Sign up and learn more at slate.com/careplus.
Yeah, that's our show. Wherever and however you're listening, subscribe, leave a rating, review, tell all your friends, and please do not forget that these amazing voices are now on YouTube. We have a YouTube channel. Like, just look for us at Karen Feeding. Very easy. And dare I say, Elizabeth is like basically our Meryl Streep. So check it out.
Agree.
If you want more parenting advice, you can find Karen Feeding, the column on slate.com. This episode of Karen Feeding is produced by Shayna Roth. Micah Phillips is our video producer. Mia Lobel is executive director of podcasts for Slate. And Ben Richmond, cuts that check, is senior director of podcast operation. For Zach Rosen, Elizabeth Newcamp, I'm Lucy Lopez. Thank you for listening.